And good morning. We're back here at KFYO Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin. It is 7:08 a.m. and we are, as promised, Tibor Nagy in the studio. And so glad you're here this morning, Tibor. How are you?
Doing super. Good morning to you, gentlemen. It's interesting for me to have to get up out of bed this early again because I'm enjoying this brief interlude of my
retirement.
Brief, and it looks like it'll be a brief interlude, but we'll see.
Well, yes, and we do need to say, of course, that Tibor Nagy is we're with the what I never can get the title right out at Tech.
I was vice provost for international affairs.
There you go.
Replaced now by my very able friend Dr. Sukant Misra. Doing a phenomenal job.
And now you are retired.
Yes.
And you're awaiting what comes next.
Awaiting further orders, which looks like they'll probably be going back to Washington, D.C.
Well,
the most interesting puzzle palace.
Are you looking forward to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to certain aspects of it. Other aspects might be a little bit more challenging.
Gotcha. Well, I'll tell you, we always enjoy having you on the show. You always have a lot of insight that you bring to our audience on a variety of subjects. Of course, your expertise. You were a ambassador a couple of times. So it's not every day you run across an ambassador. But anyway, we were talking off mic about what's on everybody's mind right now is the government shutdown.
Yeah.
Now, I know you probably may not have a lot of expertise in that particular area, but you've been through it.
Yeah.
You've been through it before.
During
you kind of know the.
Yeah, my 32-year federal career went through a number of those government shutdowns, and every federal employee knows that you may miss a paycheck or two, but at the end of the day, they're going to all catch up. So it was interesting. I was in Africa for one of those government shutdowns, and some of the members of Congress who shut down the government wanted to come out and visit. And we told them, we said, great, you want to come out and visit, but we're not allowed to come out to the airport to meet you. We're not allowed to give you transport.
We're off.
Because you have cut off, we cannot expend funds on you people. And they were, most taken aback that their Royal Highnesses would have to fend for themselves.
Call a cab.
Yeah, right. Try doing that in Nigeria and see where it takes you.
Yeah.
So your thoughts on the shutdown? Are we going to have a shutdown?
I suspect that we will. And what I fear is that most Americans say to themselves, wow, the Republicans control the presidency, they control the House, they control the Senate, so it's got to be the Republicans' fault. The truth is that this one's being driven by the Democrats because to get these appropriations passed, you have to have 60 senators. The Republicans have 51 senators with one, John McCain indisposed currently. So it's the Democrats. The Democrats have to come up with 10 votes to get this passed. They're not going to do it. So you have these people in the driver's seat, and they can point fingers to the American public and say, it's the Republicans, so they run the government.
And, of course, the press is going to be repeating that.
Of course they are. Yeah, I heard an interview coming here and by a journalist who knew better and was asking the White House Legislative Affairs Director, how can you be shutting down the government? Don't you know what they're doing? And that person knows better that you need to have 60 senators.
So the question is, who's going to break?
Well, that's going to be the interesting question.
So,
because fundamentally, philosophically, the Democrats like government. Mm-hmm. And it goes against them viscerally to have, to shut it down. Mm-hmm. So we'll see where the negotiating, talent's going to come in, but it's going to be interesting. Now, there is a slight chance that they may come through and keep it open like over the weekend.
Yeah.
Instead of a 30-day to come up with like a 5-day. I have no idea what good that would do.
It would just be all this media again in a week.
It's an absolute circus, but this is how our government unfortunately was meant to run. It was meant to be messy, and I know a lot of people.
Well, they succeeded.
They have. A lot of people sit back and say, well, it's good that the government doesn't do anything, so let them be shut down. But then it does get to the point. Our military is going to get paid. People are going to get their Social Security checks. Mm-hmm. National parks, that's going to be an issue. That's when people get mad because what they do, though, and Washington is real good at this. When there is a government shutdown, they're going to take steps to make it as inconvenient as possible to the public.
Right. They want the public to know that the government is shut down. They
Yeah,
want them to feel it.
Yeah, they want the public to know that the government does something. So, the first thing they'll do is shut down the Washington Monument and the Capitol building and not allow visitors to get into the national parks. And
People have been planning vacations for years.
Exactly.
In fact, Barack Obama shut down, what was it, one of the veteran parks.
Yeah, that's right.
And the veterans weren't allowed to go in, and it was pretty messy.
But if they want to really screw with the public, shut down TSA. You can't get in the airport. Shut down the air traffic controllers. Although Ronald Reagan, responded to that.
Yeah, well, they can't do that, and the reason being is that if they did that, then they would have an excuse to go to privatized.
Yeah. Which is
security.
basically what Reagan did. So we'll see what happens. But it's gonna be a circus, or better still, it's more a kabuki theater when everyone knows what the acts are and what the roles are going to be.
Well, you say that, but I'm afraid that there's just a whole lot of people that just don't pay attention, and they just kind of they'll believe what little they hear about it, and what little they're going to hear is going to be negative about the Republicans.
Well, what they're gonna believe is what they read on Facebook.
Yes, a lot of times, and that's I know a lot of people that they don't consume news.
No, exactly.
They're worried about their team, whether they're going to win this Friday night or not, or they're worried about whether they're going to go out
and by consuming news. To be fair, a person ought to read both sides. Sure. I really enjoy seeing what the different sides on an issue have to say, and then I kind of do and try and make up my own mind, instead of just reading one side, which reinforces my, predisposed biases.
Right. So the last time you were here, we had a lot going on in South Africa. There was some changes there. How have those affected things? Has anything changed from there?
It came out wonderfully well.
Okay.
The African National Congress did in fact vote to get rid of this scumbag who is, the current leader of South Africa as party leader, and they put in the guy that the business community likes and who's very rational. So it looks like Ramaphosa is going to be the next president of South Africa. Okay. It looks like. But what I said then, I still say today. South Africa, like all countries, needs to have really competitive politics. It's not good for a country when one party rules everything. And that's a classic example of that, whether it's South Africa or whether it's the United States.
But we don't have a problem with that here.
No.
Plenty of fighting back and forth.
Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this. 7:21 a.m., and we're back here on KFYO Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin. And this morning, Tibor Nagy is with us. We were talking about, I said what's on most people's minds today, Tibor, is the government shutdown, and we do have a text message this morning that says what they need to do is take everyone in Congress who voted to shut the government down and take their salaries away for 3 months and apply it to the military salaries. Yeah. Maybe they will feel the crunch as the public does.
Or stop the Social Security checks in their districts. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see that happen.
Yeah. See who gets blamed. Yeah. So we were in the break. We brought up North Korea.
Right.
The North Korea and South Korea seem to be playing nice with each other.
Yeah, that's this week.
This week.
The president of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, plays the international community like a Stradivarius violin. I mean, again, he has been. Last year they conducted 15 or 16 nuclear tests. He's going full force on 3 legs of the nuclear technology. During 2018, he will develop a missile that will be capable of hitting any part of the United States, continental or Hawaii or Alaska. And our policy has now had to turn from prevention to containment. Anybody who talks prevention, they're just totally naive, because nobody's going to prevent it. Now we have to do with North Korea, like we did with the Soviet Union before and with China to a certain extent, is containment and make sure that he doesn't fire his missile. He is now speaking from a position of confidence and strength, so he can be magnanimous and, reach out to South Korea and have the 2 teams march in the Olympics under a flag of good feeling and in friendship and everything. And I think I heard that the South and North Korean teams are going to field a joint women's hockey team in the Winter Olympics. So he is just a master manipulator. He can play the rest of the world, and we keep falling for it. I mean, we're almost like dogs running to the table and waiting for those scraps that he's going to throw down there.
So, in your opinion, this means nothing.
It means nothing. It means absolutely. People have to remember in dealing with him is that he has two goals. His goal is not to get nuclear weapons. Getting nuclear weapons is a tactic. His goal/strategy, number one, is regime continuity, meaning that his kid, his grandkid, his great-grandkid, and on will continue to rule Korea. That's the immediate goal. The long-term goal is for reunifying the Korean peninsula under North Korean leadership. And he's willing to wait. He doesn't care if that happens next year or in 5 years or in 200 years. But that is the goal. So if it means that nuclear weapons will advance his cause, he will do that with nuclear weapons. We just can't. We cannot go into dealing with him or looking at him with the thought that it's all about nuclear weapons. It's really not. It's about what he wants out of his long-term goals.
So the tightening of the sanctions that they've done, they've been stopping North Korean ships and keeping them from getting oil and all that stuff. Is that helping at all?
It applies pressure up to a point, but the pressure really hits the majority of Koreans much more than the regime. I mean, at the end of the day, if he wants to sit and eat beluga caviar and drink Dom Perignon champagne with every meal, he's going to do it, because the Chinese and the Russians will only allow him to be squeezed up to a point. Because again, we say America first, and without a doubt the Chinese say China first and the Russians say Russia first. And they see their interest as maintaining the current regime until it gets to the point where they see it as against their interest.
So do you think that China, they're ambivalent about him becoming a nuclear power?
Yeah, they are. They're pretty ambivalent about that because they know that it's not a threat to them. I mean, if it would be for us like Canada had nuclear weapons. Would anybody in this room really care whether or not Canada had nuclear weapons?
Well, but with the weapons that North Korea had, I mean, they've had a lot of missteps where they've had it where one missile came down and blew up their own stuff. I mean, what happens when something happens and it ends up falling in China instead of in the United States?
That's a great question, and the answer to that is that's why the North Koreans are very careful that they shoot it over the Sea of Japan. They never shoot their missiles to where it would either touch Russian or Chinese territory.
Well, so if I hear you right, we're going to have to live with a nuclear North Korea.
Absolutely. I think 2017 was our last chance to take them out militarily.
And we didn't have the heart for that.
No,
I mean, we didn't. Or the
and at the end of the day,
it would be awfully bloody.
The most surgical campaign still would have resulted in hundreds of thousands of South Koreans dying, certainly hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of North Koreans dying, and
a really mad China. They do not want a unified North and South Korea on their border.
They don't want a unified North and South Korea under South Korea on their border. Right. And the last thing they want is millions of hungry North Koreans running across into China, and it would have totally screwed up China's economy. So from their point of view, you can't help your neighbors.
So what's going to change? What's going to change about it once they officially have nuclear weapons and what do we do?
I think what's going to happen is we're going to evolve a type of working relationship with them, just accepting the fact that they have nuclear weapons. But the interesting thing is that what happened in North Korea, I think, is what is really impacting our views of Iran. Because, Iran is the one international issue on which the White House, the Congress, the Democrats, everybody's agreed on. And I think it's because of what happened with North Korea that we're adamant about the Iranians not getting them.
Okay, and there's the music. We'll take a break here in 30 seconds and then come back and talk a little more with Tibor Nagy on the other side. This is KFYO Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin. Coming up on 7:29 a.m. and 25 degrees outside. High today is going to be 69. There is a fire weather watch in effect. Going to be kind of windy and ugly today. News Talk, 95.1 FM and 790 AM. KFYO Mornings, Dave King, Matt Martin. And in the studio, again, Tibor Nagy with us this morning. And so much to talk about, but one of the things I wanted to ask you about, and the thing that interests me so much is ISIS.
Right.
The news stories that we've been getting, when you can get information about ISIS, is that they've just been decimated. They've lost their caliphate,
Right.
and ISIS is not as popular as it used to be.
Right.
We're seeing that people are not flooding to join ISIS now.
Right.
The story we had the other day was that America says that they have killed 80,000 ISIS fighters. They're burying them with bulldozers.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, the face of terrorism in 2018, it's interesting. It's almost like a role reversal where the Islamic State is no longer a state. Their core is still out there. There are ISIS-related groups. For example, remember in the Philippines, this ISIS-related group actually took over a city,
right,
and they held a city for a number of months. They have become more of an inspiration. And the problem with an inspiration is they lead to acts like the ones that happened mostly in the West last year with, people getting in a truck and running over people, which are also devastating to the locality, maybe not as devastating as a 9/11, but they still are very unpredictable and they can shake up a country. As ISIS their profile has dropped, Al-Qaeda is coming back. A lot of people, when it was ISIS in the news, people stopped hearing about Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda has never gone away. Al-Qaeda is there. There are Al-Qaeda linked groups all over the world. They're very, very dangerous. For example, Al-Shabaab in Somalia, Boko Haram in northern Nigeria. Then there are the groups in the Sahelian region where we lost 4 American soldiers, I think, a couple of months ago. So they are still there. So international, Islamic Jihad is still very much alive. What we are no longer focusing on is quote unquote this caliphate, the state, because that's when it was like in our face, when these people were running the city of Mosul, with several million people. Now they've kind of gone back, much more back underground, but they're still out there. They're getting recruits. For example, in Afghanistan, there is an ISIS organization in Afghanistan which is being fought not only by the United States and the Afghan government, but also the Taliban, because the Taliban see ISIS as a threat to them.
wow.
So,
I keep wondering, what is the end game?
well,
Years from now, decades from now, are we still going to be fighting?
Dave, it depends, because there's two facets of terrorism. One is the combat, the anti-terrorist methods to get rid of the bad guys themselves, but the other is the cornfield where terrorists are grown. And even though we are beating ISIS, the cornfield is still growing because the conditions in those mostly Sunni countries, that cause the frustrations and the factors for people to be attracted to terrorism,
right,
they're still there. Until the cornfield gets cut down, i.e. you have much better governments who care about their people, who are
which
more
is going
equitable.
to require some kind of a revolution.
A revolution in government thinking. For example, that's exactly what Prince Salman in Saudi Arabia is trying to do. He wants to have a total societal shift, and he's trying to do it at the right speed, not too fast and not too slow, for the young Saudis to exactly change the environment so young Saudis will not be attracted to radical Islamic terrorism.
Right.
But that has to be done throughout the Middle East, throughout Egypt, throughout Algeria, Yemen, and on and on and on, because you have millions and millions of people, and now more and more in North Africa and also in the northern part of the Central African states, which are Islamic, that are going to be attracted to this kind of ideology because they can't go and vote, they can't find a job, so they hear the siren song of come, let's turn the world into a caliphate, and then you'll have your
Well,
and everything will be rosy.
exactly.
And they have money. Where since they've lost the oil fields and other things, where is the money coming from?
Well, they still get money from crime. They still get money from selling. For example, in Afghanistan, there's a lot of opium to be sold, and they still have some fairly wealthy patrons. Which have been the people who've been bankrolling them. You look at all the thousands and thousands, for example, of Saudi royals who have considerable wealth, and all you need is a fraction of them to be radical, to be willing to write checks to these folks, and that's a heck of a lot of money.
Yeah, it is for a fact.
So, what about Iran? We discussed it a little bit during the break. I don't think we've talked about it on the radio, but Iran just kind of had this
a mini revolution.
a mini revolution.
Is it over?
Yeah,
Well,
it is.
And the thing that surprised me was they actually came out and they admitted that there were some issues.
Yeah, well, but remember, this one started totally differently. This one started, actually, it was the conservatives in the rural areas that promoted this one because they wanted to undermine the president, because the president of Iran was recently reelected, and he is, quote unquote, a moderate in Iranian terms, and the conservatives hate him. So they try to get their supporters in the rural areas, and a couple to go out and protest against the president, because economically things were supposed to get better after this, agreement was signed with Iran. They haven't. Well, what happened was these guys went out, but not only did they protest against the president, they started protesting against all the ayatollahs and the religious leaders. So all of a sudden, these guys said, "Whoops, that's not what we wanted to see." So they sent in the Revolutionary Guard to put the kibosh on it very quickly. But it shows you Iran is a rotten society. The young people, it's mostly now a country of young people who've had it up to their, with these, these old religious leaders. So the society is going to change. The question is it going to be evolutionary or revolutionary?
Yeah.
And these guys, I think they realize that they're riding a tiger. Yes, they can keep a lid on it with the Revolutionary Guard and other repressive methods, but all that's doing is the steam is just building up and building up and building up. And we don't know what the end game's going to be.
Okay, quick break, and we'll come back with some final thoughts from Tibor Nagy. And we're back at 7:46 a.m. here on KFYO Mornings. Dave King, Matt Martin, and Tibor Nagy in the studio this morning. We're talking off mic this morning with Tibor about this being a Goldilocks moment.
Yeah,
tell us what you mean.
Well, yeah, let's not just focus on bad news.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the main reasons that the stock market is going, full force ahead, it's not all about the United States. This is one of the rare moments in world history when every single major world region is growing economically. I don't know when it ever happened that it's not only the big ones like the Europe and China and the United States, but you add to it Japan, which had been going downward economically for decades, and you add to it the what we call the emerging economies, the Africas, the Latin Americas, the South Asias, and you also have very low inflation around the world, except in Venezuela where it's going to be 10,000% this year, and interest rates are relatively low. So it would really take a couple of events to screw up the world economy. It really is a rare moment, and I think it portends for very positive future.
Does Donald Trump have much to do with this, or worldwide, or
I don't think he does worldwide, but I think he certainly has set the right tone economically in the United States, and unfortunately, because the media is being filled in with this vitriol and circus, that there's no attention given to his role. Because the president doesn't directly impact the economy, but the president has that image, and the super soapbox, which sends a signal, especially related to consumer confidence, to business confidence. Are the business folks going to bring their money back? Are they going to start hiring? Are they going to give wage increases? So I think that part of it, the business community has been very happy about.
It is just astounding to me to see the good news that has come out, particularly like Apple and like Walmart and all of these companies, many of these companies, who are giving $1,000, $2,000 bonuses to their employees, and then plus raising their minimum wage, and yet you have the mainstream media that's putting a negative spin on that.
Yeah, well, their attitude is, they start with the point of view that we have a president who is not qualified to be president. So anything good that happens, he could not possibly be responsible for.
Yeah. So is this going to come back and bite the Democrats?
I don't know. It's going to be very interesting between the period now and the elections as to what happens, like government shutdowns. Are there any more statements that that go bonkers around? It's just going to be very interesting because we're at a period of time when there very well could be a wave election, just like when the Tea Party started after Obama and the Obamacare came in, and the American people at the time were very angry at Obama, and both the Senate and the House flipped. Remember that during those elections, and so many state houses flipped. And the early indications then were like a Republican being elected to a vacant Senate seat in Massachusetts. That was, well, right now what are we seeing? A Democrat was elected to a vacant Senate seat in Alabama. So I think the trends are, to be looking at it objectively, I anticipate a wave election.
For the Democrats.
For the Democrats. Yeah, I mean, I have to be truthful and objective in my analysis.
But then, on the other hand, if you look at the last election, it just came out of nowhere.
Oh, absolutely.
And you have to wonder.
Absolutely. It's going to come down to who are the people who are going to come, who are going to care more about coming out and voting.
Yeah,
in an off-year election.
Saw this morning Trump had 37 and 38% approval ratings over 4 companies that took ratings. So he's hanging around there, but with the beating that the press is giving him, it's amazing he's got that much.
There's a certain percentage that's not going to abandon him no matter what. But the issue is going to be who is going to come out to vote. Now, international events could influence the election if there is a disaster, say with North Korea, or the other biggie, which could really screw things up, is if we get in a trade war with China.
Yeah,
that would be huge.
What are the odds of that?
I'd say at this stage, I think they're getting to be about 50-50. And I'll tell you what, the outcome would be devastating for the Chinese. The estimates are that it would negatively impact 5% of our gross domestic product, so we would shrink 5%, but the Chinese would shrink 25%. So they understand the gravity of that.
So with that, you've got like Apple talking about bringing jobs over to the United States that they've had elsewhere. I mean, Apple employs what, 300,000+ people in China?
Yeah. Well, and you hit on a fantastic point, because a lot of these companies, they're driving up the stock prices, they're reporting huge earnings, but look and see where those earnings are coming from. An awful lot of those earnings are coming from overseas. The other big trade issue, of course, is NAFTA. It'll be now, early 2018, where the United States, has to decide whether to renegotiate NAFTA or to step out of it. Well, for Texas especially, it would be devastating if the United States decided to abandon NAFTA.
Well, right now it looks like milk in Canada could be the biggest problem with making it happen.
Yeah, it's a different set of issues, with both countries. And the whole NAFTA thing's also going to influence Mexico's elections next year. Because of how NAFTA turns out, Mexico could end up electing a very anti-American left-wing populist by the name of Obrador, which would, again, not be good for the United States of America.
Was they going to pay for the wall?
No, they're not. Of course, they're not going to pay for the wall.
Well,
I don't think anybody.
Are they going to pay for it maybe in some other way than an actual cash payment, writing a check?
No, I don't think so. And I think during the campaign, everybody knew that Mexico was not going to pay for the wall.
You're going to get lucky. You're going to be lucky if they have that wall at this point, I think.
What do you think that the chances are building the wall?
There will be a wall, but whether it's physical or electronic or digital or robotic or drone remains to be seen, but I think that'll be part of the deal.
Thank you so much for coming in. We always appreciate it, and there's never enough time to cover all the topics.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
We'll be back with more in a moment.